we're talking about the history of humanity and how we have been influenced. And it's like we deserve to know that, and we deserve the technologies that are being suppressed.
We're being exposed to only so much information. We're not being fully educated. There's a difference.
What percentage of UAP sightings, in your belief, go unreported by our pilots?
I would estimate we're somewhere near 5% reporting, perhaps 5% reporting.
If there isn't anything, then why the push to cover it up?
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
By then, I had already accepted this new paradigm of there being, as Senator Inouye said, and I'm quoting, there's a secret government with its own Air Force,
its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself. Free from the law itself. Free from the law itself.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We have created a referendum known as the It Can't Be a Joke Revolution and Initiatives. This is a movement of thought and consciousness. Our mission is to educate and plant the seeds of curiosity surrounding the issues that we deem most critical, with the goal of freeing humanity from the powers that seek to hold us down.
We use this as an opportunity to not only expose the corruption in our country and world, but to discuss the importance of consciousness, self-awareness, and spiritual evolution as we seek to crack the riddles of life and our purpose on this planet.
Melissa,
Kevin,
let's blast off.
Let's. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. We are so excited to introduce you to today's guest, Toby Leary. He is the CEO and co-founder of Cape Gunworks. He's a lifelong shooter, Second Amendment advocate, and chairman of the Civil Rights Coalition. Leary is also the voice and producer of the podcast RapidFire, which is an excellent talk show about all things Second Amendment. Cape Gunworks is Massachusetts' premier provider for firearm training, safety, purchasing, and education, and it's located in Hyannis, Massachusetts, in the heart of Cape Cod. Thanks so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
And Kevin became a member of Cape Gunworks earlier this year. So that's kind of how this connection started. And then we heard about all of your work and you being a local hero for challenging the firearms law here in Massachusetts. So
it's an amazing spot. Yeah. When I first stepped foot in there, it reminded me of what we know of back home in Nebraska. There's a lot of different ranges out there. And, Great Plains people are... I feel like every other person has, they either go hunting or it's very common out there. And stepping foot in there, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is where it's at. Yeah.
I'm glad there weren't a bunch of deer heads on the wall like I'm used to seeing and have my friends and uncles.
They're up high.
There's a couple.
Oh, are they?
Did you not see them? Yeah.
No, I guess that does ring a bell.
There's a huge selection. And we got our most recent, we have two, and we have a Model 1911. And that gun's it's got a great weight. It's all metal and it shoots, is it 45 caliber, right? And that's perfect for me. I love it. It's like, it's got a punch. It feels great. Fits in my hand great. And then for Melissa, we got the new Bodyguard.
Yeah.
Which is much smaller. It's more compact. It's
very accurate and easy to shoot, aim, and...
Yeah, and it's much smaller. It's very good for if you're looking for something that, if you get your license to carry and you want to conceal, it's perfect for that. It's the perfect size. And they have the selection there. They also have, if you become a member, you can go there literally whenever you want. Mm-hmm. You can bring a guest free. You can use the range whenever you want free. And it's 5% off anything you buy for the entire year. I'm like, well, that's a no-brainer. I want to be able to go at the, drop of a dime and go practice, go train. And I just think it's something that is crucial for people to start to look into more and to look into it for yourself or your family or for people that you love, because ever since the dawn of gunpowder, people have had guns. They've used it to hunt. They use it for protection. I've had people say, well, you don't need what? What are you going to do when, like, if the military is doing something and they have all these bigger guns? What are you possibly going to do? I'm like, well, there's many different reasons you can have it. If someone breaks into your home, why wouldn't you want to have something that will protect you and your family? Or let's say you're camping with the family. A bear breaks into the tent. Pray to God it doesn't, knock on wood. But wouldn't you want something there to be able to help defend yourself?
Yeah.
So as we've been researching everything, especially the past couple years, past 4 years, and then when we've started to basically join forces with our brains and we learn so much more, it's like, oh, no brainer. This is a must. And there's a stigma right now on it that's being pumped into the mainstream. That's trying to make just normal Americans feel like, no. We don't need that. No, we can't have that. There's a reason behind that. They're playing to some agenda there. They want people thinking that they don't need to be able to protect themselves.
Yeah. Well, what you talk about on the Civil Rights Coalition is that all of these new laws that get passed, it's about control. It's not about people protecting the citizens.
Well, it's kind of funny because if you read the work that the founders of this country, the deep dive into rights and human rights and natural rights, and the Second Amendment is just a written acknowledgement that government can make no law infringing upon it. It was considered the most basic human right, natural law. Like if you think about the preamble or the Declaration of Independence, it talks about these inalienable rights bestowed on us by our Creator. They've been endowed by our Creator. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How do you have life if you can't protect it? How do you have liberty if you can't protect it? Those are two things that are very much at risk if you don't have a means to protect them. And they will go away if you don't have that means. And then the pursuit of happiness is also along those same lines, that somebody is somewhere along the line is going to step in and say, oh, you can't do that. And it's like, well, wait a minute. That's what makes me happy in life, and I want to do that. No, sorry, you can't, because we say so. Right. So really, their acknowledgement of the most basic human right was the right to self-defense. I mean, it goes back to Cain and Abel. It's like evil entered into the heart of man at the earliest recording of history, and there was a murder, and so man has the inherent basic right, and no one would even argue that the little old lady living alone in a home doesn't have the right to defend herself against a home invader. It doesn't have the right to defend herself against the people trying to abuse her or take her money or scam her out of whatever, right? Everyone kind of would say, oh yeah, that's terrible that happens, but yet on the same side of their brain, they somehow go along with the logic that, oh, like you pointed out, Kevin, oh, nobody needs that, or why do you need that, or why does anybody need a military style assault weapon or a large capacity magazine or how many guns do you need? It's all of a sudden a needs-based society around firearms, but in every other aspect of life, nobody questions like, well, why do you need 2 cars? Why do you need a house over 800 square feet or whatever? We're not a needs-based society. And by the way, let's go back to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the truth of the matter is, none of those things mean anything if you don't have the means to defend them. And that is that's the thing the media that you said harps on and making people feel bad or tries to get people emotionally involved to the conversation to say like, if it weren't for you clinging to your guns and your Bible and your religion or whatever the thing that's been said, but if you didn't want to own that particular gun, people would be walking the streets today that aren't here. And nothing is further from the truth. It's disingenuous. It's manipulation. It's, I believe, outright evil to prey on the low-informed person out there and get them emotionally charged up, because there's a lot of people that get very emotionally charged over the issue of firearms because people have died, horrible massacres, school shootings, assassinations, everything else in between, right? And we want to make it an easy label to just say, oh, if it wasn't for the gun, those people would be alive today. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's not true because evil people are going to find a way to kill you if they want to kill you, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be through many other means. So, so the point I'm trying to make is they have to demonize and make the tool the object of evil rather than the person who committed the evil act. Mm-hmm. And if they can do that and get enough low-informed people out there to go along with it, then they feel like they have this upper moral superior high ground in order to talk down to people or project onto them that they're not good people because they want to defend their lives and their husbands and their wives and their kids and their families or their neighborhood or their community, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's an age-old problem because tyranny can't exist when the people have power. And I find that argument that you brought up, Kevin, of, oh, what are you going to do against the military? You have F-15s and, nuclear bombs and, with your little AR-15. And it's like, well, if I can't do anything, why are you so worried about it?
Right.
I think the fact that you want me to not have it proves that you have an agenda for me that I wouldn't willingly go along with. Mm-hmm. And so, no.
You want to know something funny? Is in a debate that I believed was on a very respectful level. We have different people sharing their points of view, saying this from a respectful place. This is what I believe, rather than asking for stricter gun control on everything and to take away people's guns and to restrict their rights. How about this alternative? Why don't we go after the cartel who's bringing in the guns? Yeah. The people who are selling guns on the black market. Doesn't that seem like the common sense thing that we should be doing, is going after the evil people who are putting into people's hands who are not mentally well so they can make money? But bringing up that point, you're going to get showered with how terrible of an idea that is. And how dare you come up with that solution? That's not the cognitive dissonance that we're seeing around this topic is like...
Well, and like you were explaining earlier about all the tragedies, that's sadly what they put on every news story all the time. That's what they see, and that helps, kind of tug at people's heartstrings and emotions, and they just kind of follow suit without really having any knowledge around it at all.
If it bleeds, it leads. That's the way it is. And the news story of, 5'0", 55-year-old woman defends herself against 3 guys who attack with her firearm doesn't exactly further the agenda of total disarmament. Because, I've been at this for 30 plus years now, as far as what I would consider a 2A activist to a certain extent or another. And I remember back 30 years ago when the federal assault weapons ban passed in 94, the mantra was, nobody's coming for your guns. Nobody's coming for your guns. We just want common sense gun control to save lives. And if it would just save one life, wouldn't you be willing to give up, some part of the Second Amendment if it's going to save lives? And that was the way they made you feel guilty. They tried to, beat you over the head for wanting a particular gun or whatever. And the truth of the matter is, yes, that is exactly what they want to do. They want to make sure that every one of us is disarmed 100%. If it wasn't the case, at every victory they've had along the way, they would have just gone away and been done and happy. But the truth is, there's an insatiable appetite for all of our human rights. But the first one they got to get out of the way is the Second Amendment, because I know it's very cliche or bumper sticker-ish to say the Second Amendment protects all the rest. And it's true, though. Like, I was on a long call yesterday and today, actually, on the drive over with some people who want to get active and want to get involved. And they're like, what's your messaging going to be over the next 2 years for our ballot committee and our, the Civil Rights Coalition and everything else? And it's very simple. It's, if they can do this to the second, they can do it to any other right. And basically, all it took was a simple majority in the state house and a signature by a complicit governor, and your rights are fundamentally changed forever. And it's like, that's not very cool. Like, if that's the case, it was never a right. It was a privilege that we needed to ask, Mother May I permission for in order to enact or to exercise. So that is really, I think, if you can somehow shape that argument into a 5-second elevator pitch and say, what other right are you willing to subject to the same standard that you're willing to put the Second Amendment to? Because basically, if you apply any other right the same way, that just through a simple majority in the state house and a signature by the governor, and your rights are gone or fundamentally changed forever. I don't think anyone would be willing to do that. But then they say, well, guns kill people and no right is absolute and we can walk and chew gum at the same time. All the isms start coming out, and it's like, it's to protect people. But the problem is, when it comes to our basic rights, and I'm not just including the Second Amendment on this, we have been lulled into a false sense of security. We're literally suffering from Stockholm syndrome. And instead of being the voice of reason and standing up for the rights of the people, we've jumped into the stream and we're floating downstream with the erosion of our rights. And actually, we're probably swimming with the current. Mm-hmm. That's how far our rights have been eroded. And going back to what I was saying earlier about our founders, people like Lysander Spooner and Theophilus Parsons and James Iredell, the first Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, these guys believe that if you let the dam crack a little bit on the usurpation of our rights, you let a little bit go, the whole republic falls. They're like, and they were speaking in hyperbole then, but really it's 250 years later, and we have a fundamentally different country than we did 249 years ago. Right. And where they understood the power rested in the people, and the people told government where their limits of power were. And somehow that script has got flipped to now we have this ruling class of people that tell us what we can do and what we can't do within every area of our life, every aspect of our life, not just firearms. I mean, everything. And again, it goes back to what I was saying before about, is it really a right if it is so fragile that somebody in an elected position can just vote it away? And that is something that is antithetical to the entire American experiment where, the true fountain of power is in the people. Our government is there to represent us. And there's limits to what they do, like James Madison wrote in Federalist 49, that it is very important for all three branches of government to operate within their constitutional limits of power. And then he goes on to talk about the legislature, and he says they're by far the most important branch of government because they are the confidential guardians of the people's rights. First, he said that they are the blood and from the people, the communities. They're the businessmen, they're the relatives, they're the friends, the neighbors of the community. They're numerous, and they are their confidential guardian. They're the ones we send to make sure they're the stalwart and the gatekeeper of our rights. And yet now, again, as that script has been flipped, they are the ones that go and swear an oath to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And then they themselves introduce legislation that is contrary to the very document, the Constitution, that they swore to uphold and protect. That is, I swear, they're selling their souls in the process, and they are violating their oath of office by even introducing it. It's an act of treason.
Yes.
And then they don't just introduce it, they pass it. And then they get it signed, and then they do a victory lap and have a press conference about what good work they're doing.
I think a great example of that is, my favorite congressman is Tim Burchett. Tim Burchett's from Tennessee, and he is one of the leading congressmen who is pushing for UFO disclosure. And he says the most blatantly obvious things, if there's nothing there, then why the push to cover it up? He says that we're trying to get access to this information or to see a certain facility, and they won't let him. They won't let him pass. And these are our congressmen. These are the people of the highest power. And it goes back to, we elect these officials that we believe are representing us and looking out for our best interests. When you have people all throughout the CIA, the FBI, and the military-industrial complex who it appears that those are the people that are actually running our country. And there's no accountability whatsoever because they're in the shadows. And it blows my mind, because exactly what you're saying, these people, especially Congress, is supposed to be representing all of us. There's so many more of them. And then there's the agenda that they're seeking after, and they're told what they can and can't do.
Oh, 100%. That's happened in our state for decades now, especially in the State House. Right now, the State House is controlled by three people. It's the governor, it's the Speaker of the House, and it's the Senate President. Nothing happens in this state without their approval. And even if you're in the majority and you think that you should have something passed or whatever, you're not going to get your bill unless you're in the good graces of those three. And then nowadays, there's not even a debate about a bill anymore. The Republicans and Democrats don't debate the nuance of any legislation. It's taken into leadership puts it out, this is going to the floor, this is going to get voted on, and they only put stuff on the floor that they know will pass. How they get it to pass is through corruption. They say, hey, if you want that committee, if you want that legislative stipend, if you want that leadership pay, then you'll capitulate. You'll vote. You will not stand up against the speaker. You will not call for a roll call vote. You'll just do your thing. And if you don't, you'll have a office out in the hallway. You won't have leadership pay. You won't have a stipend, and you won't have any type of committee assignment, which is, by the way, almost doubles their salary. So they have a basic, I think it's $84,000 a year base salary. Most of them are making 160, 170 grand a year. All that extra money is through the leadership pay, the stipend, and their committee assignments. And if they don't agree to fall in line in what the speaker or the Senate president wants, then they get none of those. They get their base salary. They don't get staff. They don't get their bills ever heard. They get no money for their districts for the reason the people sent them there in the first place. And it is an absolute collusion and conspiracy to violate us of our most basic rights.
And I'm hoping you can explain it for me, but the emergency preamble on October 2nd, I was going to ask you about Governor Healy and what's the narrative around that, and why does that happen? I feel like you just explained it.
Well, no, it's a very rare thing in the grand scheme of things. It is, if you think about what it's called, emergency preamble, it's for an emergent condition or emergent set of circumstances, like a flood or a hurricane or a tragedy or a blizzard or an invasion or a pandemic. We all saw how that went, right? And then but it's some set of circumstances that would enable the law to go into effect immediately, because delaying it 90 days would be not beneficial to the people. There's 4 reasons they have the emergency preamble under Article 48 of the Constitution. Number 1 is for the peace. Number 2 is the health. Number 3 is the safety. And number 4 is the convenience of the public. So those 4 things have to be for the peace, the health, the safety, and convenience of the public. If those aren't met, then there's no emergent condition. There's no true emergency. So therefore, you can't sign an emergency preamble. The problem is, in our history in Massachusetts, they've given great deference to convenience and basically say, well, the governor gets to decide what that is, and she's a politician, or he, and therefore convenience can be for political reasons. But the problem is it says of the public. And her emergency preamble that she signed on October 2nd doesn't meet that standard. Mm-hmm. It's not for convenience of the public. Mm-hmm. It's for the convenience of those in government, because they're the ones that passed this unconstitutional law.
And what was the law?
The law that passed on July 18th by the Senate and the House, State Senate and State House of Representatives, was a bill called H-4885, which became known as Chapter 135 of the Acts of 2024. It's a 116-page omnibus bill that fundamentally changes firearms ownership in the state of Massachusetts. Everything from hunting to owning antiques and relics to owning
pepper spray.
Pepper spray now is a new licensing for under 18, plus non-residents and what they can. It requires registration and a government-created database that shares information with health and law enforcement and corrections, as well as to track crime and data and all this stuff. But yet that to me alone is just unbelievable. Like, you think about the Pentagon has been hacked before. Now they're going to have every gun owner's information on some database in Massachusetts with what they own, how many they own, where they live, and
if it's an antique sitting in a closet downstairs,
right? And so
who's going to register?
It's a wish list for the criminal enterprise, right? Oh. And so, not to mention the far more nefarious intentions of government when they come to take them away. They know exactly what you got, right?
Yeah.
But so anyway, that was the law that passed. July 17th, it came out of conference committee after being debated for 3 months by 6 people, 3 senators and 3 House representatives. And when it came out, it was about 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night on July 17th. It was signed into law by the House and the Senate by 2 p.m. the next day. So nobody read that 116-page bill. They got in line. They followed directions. They said, yes, sir. And they voted. There was a couple people that live in very conservative districts that would not have been able to be reelected had they voted for it. So they get the hall pass from Speaker Mariano, who says, like, all right, yeah, you can go ahead and vote against this bill. But like, it was on a case-by-case exception basis. Like, there was nobody that stood up and made a speech and said, like, this has to stop. We're violating our oath of office. The Article 17 under the Mass State Constitution says that the right of the people to keep and bear arms for the civil defense shall not be infringed. The oldest living constitution in the world, ratified in 1780, and they just pretend like it doesn't exist. It's unbelievable. And it's all done by an abuse of power, collusion. I had a half-an-hour meeting yesterday with Diana DeZoglio, who is the state auditor, who passed the ballot initiative 1 in the last election to audit the state house, and it got 72% approval in the last election. That is an overwhelming mandate. The people want transparency. They want to know what's going on in the state house. So what does Ron Mariano do? He says, the people have spoken. So what we're going to do is we're going to hire an independent auditor to go through the finances of the State House. That isn't what that was about. It was about auditing the entire den of evil and exposing the corruption and the collusion that I just talked about, not to mention, the finances. But there's an Office of Ethics that the state passed into law I believe it was in the 70s. The whole conflict of interest law and Office of Ethics. That office sent a letter to Sean Crevier, who's the Ware police chief, Ware PD police chief. He was the only police chief, to my knowledge, that stood up for his oath of office and the rights of the people and said, hey guys, there's a bill coming down the pipeline here that is so bad it'll erode your right to keep and bear arms. It'll erode your rights. You need to call your legislators, call your senators, urge them to vote against it. He put 4 posts on the official Facebook page of the Ware PD police station. Well, that Office of Ethics sent him a conflict of interest letter, a 7-page single-spaced letter on how he had violated his ethics as a public servant by standing up for the Constitution.
For not going along with their coup.
Right. And it was basically one of those like scenes you see from Goodfellas, or, you know, the mob coming along and saying, you know, this is a real nice restaurant you got here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. And we can help with that. You know, we offer fire insurance, you know, and every Friday you pay us and we'll make sure this place doesn't burn down. That was the letter that the state ethics committee sent to Sean Crevier, because they said this is these 4 violations each carry a potential of $100,000 or $25,000, so a total of $100,000 fine against you personally. And they threatened him, and they said, but we feel this matter is now closed with this public letter we're sending. And meanwhile, actual conflict of interest violations, actual violations of the state ethics committee law takes place every single day on Beacon Hill, with actual money being used to get people to vote a certain way. And that, by definition, is what the law that was passed in the 70s was there to prevent. But instead, we call attention to one guy who stands up for the Constitution. And by the way, as a side note, every time gun control legislation's passed in this state, they have a press conference. And guess what? They have uniformed police there that come to the microphone and say how this is going to save lives and make us all safer, even though we don't take AR-15s off the street very often, but we're going to make our streets safer by taking these ones off. And it's like, it's madness. It's insanity. They're basically calling you stupid every day in the media because no one ever calls into question what they say.
Right.
They go along with it.
Do whatever they want, free of, it's just like what Senator Inouye says. There's, you know, the secret government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism. They do all of this in the shadows. They're not looking out for the best interests of the individual. They don't care remotely at all what you think and your rights. They don't want you to have the rights. And that's the vibes I get from them. And every time I look at anything that's going on.
The propaganda that's taken place over the last 10, 20 years with social media, but people align their moral beliefs more with politics. When I look at things that I think are evil or controlling and demonic, I feel like that statement is true.
Yeah, there's, like I said, we're living with this Stockholm syndrome, like where we feel that government is in the right and they're not. They're so far out of control right now, it's not even funny. And there are these 2 sets of laws. One is the malum prohibitum laws they're illegal because we say so, but they carry the weight of some of the worst felonies out there. Like, look at what happens with the ATF, and perfect example is Brian Malinowski. I don't know if you heard the story. He was the highest paid municipal employee in the state of Arkansas. He ran the Bill and Hillary Clinton airport, and he developed a hobby of liking guns. And so he'd go to the gun shows on the weekends and buy and sell and trade. He even got some tables and, you know, sold merch and sold stuff. And he was paid $265,000 a year by the state of Arkansas. He didn't do it for the money. He did the gun show scene for the fun and the passion and the nuance of it. Well, ATF determined that he is in the business of dealing firearms. This was one of the buzzwords they came out with in the zero tolerance era of the Biden administration. You're in the business of dealing in firearms without a license. So again, this guy, public figure, works at the Bill and Hillary Clinton airport. You can go see him at his office and talk about this, right? Nope, they don't do that. They don't pull him over and, you know, have a nice conversation. They don't knock on his door in broad daylight and say, hey, we have some concerns about what you're doing on the weekends. They get a no-knock warrant. They show up with police cars in full kit at 6 a.m. in the morning. It's still dark. Come up, put a piece of tape over his Ring doorbell camera, cut the power to the house, force entry. He wakes up. They hear the bump in the night. He thinks someone's coming to rob him. Grabs a gun, loads it, tells his wife to stay in the bedroom, goes out in the hall. She didn't listen. She was right behind him, sees movement in the hallway, and they have motion detector lights that aren't coming on. So he's really confused about that. So he yells, "Hey, get out of here," fires a warning shot into the ground. They shot him in the head. Dead.
What?
With his wife right behind him.
When did this happen?
This happened in the last year. Yep.
Oh my God.
This happened
And
in the
this
last
is
year.
obviously it's not on the news.
This was on the news,
was.
but it wasn't really covered the way I just explained it. They, in fact, they ran a internal affairs investigation and cleared everybody of any wrongdoing. They said, "Oh yeah, they followed procedure. They got shot at. They had to return fire for their own safety." Meanwhile, none of them, not a single one, wore a body camera. And even the Little Rock, Arkansas police that were there on the scene, who wear body cameras all the time, didn't wear body cameras. And when Stephen Dettelbach, the director of the ATF, was called into question on the House, I believe it was the House Judiciary Committee, he said, "Well, we just don't have the money for the body cameras in the budget." And it was, he got taken to the cleaners on that. But even still, this is the type of thing that is a malum prohibitum law. It's illegal because we say so, and we have the badge, and we have the superiority. Then there's the malum in se, which is evil. Everybody knows it's illegal because it violates, the conscience. It violates your heart. It violates the human condition. It's the rape, the robbery, the, murder, kidnapping, home invasion, whatever it is, that it doesn't take, a 5-year-old can tell you it's wrong. It's not some big legal jargon. It's just wrong. Everybody would agree on earth that it's wrong because it, violates the conscience of man. Those laws, unfortunately, are the ones that get a lot of the hall passes in the American court systems for career criminals. And, these people are like let out of jail early on personal recognizance. The state now posts their bond, get them out of jail. They give them an ankle bracelet. Our prisons and our jails are empty in this state. They're letting prisoners out like crazy. And it's not because there isn't bad guys. There's plenty of bad guys to fill them up with. They have no resolve to do that. They're letting them go on the malum in se, those crimes that are truly evil. The fentanyl dealers, the drug dealers, the people that are getting arrested with multiple felon in possession of a firearm charges that are literally killing people by the product they sell on the streets. And they're let out of jail continually. But yet, on the other hand, you got the Brian Malinowskis of the world where they go in full kit and instead of just serving a warrant at his office or knock on the door during the daylight, and then they're cleared of any wrongdoing. I mean, this has been the history of the ATF. Look at Randy Weaver at Ruby Ridge. What happened there, that standoff? Ruby Ridge happened because a confidential informant managed to convince Randy Weaver to cut a shotgun barrel under 18 inches. That's insanity.
Yeah.
We talk about Operation Paperclip a lot, and how after World War II, only around 12 Nazis were executed. The rest we brought over here and into Argentina and spread out throughout the world. This is Gestapo tactics here. No joke. This is what they did. They would go around, they do whatever they want. How can you possibly think that it's okay or right to break into someone's home in the middle of the night who literally is not a threat, is living their life? You put tape over the Ring doorbell, you break into someone's home, and they shoot him dead.
Right.
I want people, please, think about that. How in any world, we want to see accountability for this, and people need to wake up because these are the people that are being elected. That is crazy.
Yeah, and it's worse than that because I just mentioned Ruby Ridge. The sniper that shot Vicki Weaver in the head while she was holding their infant child was a guy named Lon Hariuchi. He was an FBI HRT sniper. They had killed Randy Weaver's son. They shot him in the back, shot the dog, and shot Vicki Weaver in the head. all because of a shotgun barrel that was less than 18 inches. That's why they raided his house. That you brought up Waco. Waco happened because they heard full auto gunfire. I don't know if you've heard of force reset triggers or binary triggers or even a bump stock, the whole thing that's in modern lingo. Back then it was something called a hellfire trigger. So the Branch Davidians liked guns. They shot all the time, and they had this hellfire trigger on their AK-47 or AR, I don't remember which. And it simulated full auto fire. It was perfectly legal. You got an ATF letter with it. But they suspected the Branch Davidians of having a machine gun that they didn't pay the federal $200 transfer tax on. So they raided the Waco, Texas. They raided the Branch Davidians. That standoff, 143 people, I think it was, burned to their deaths.
Yeah, they burned.
Yeah, it's insanity. It's total insanity. And guess who was on the scene at Waco? Lon Hariuchi, the same sniper that killed Vicky Weaver, was there shooting Branch Davidians out of the house. And then they all posed for pictures on the smoldering ash. And there was David Chipman, who was the ATF agent, who was nominated to be the director of the ATF, standing there like it's a war trophy with the smoldering ashes of the Branch Davidians, with 143 people who were lost their lives, slaughtered. Yeah, murdered by their own government. All of them were absolved from any wrongdoing. Years later, Randy Weaver won in a case against the government. He was paid, I think, $30 million, but that's, not how he wanted his life to go down. And but the truth of the matter is, this is the agency that's in charge of federal gun law. And I don't know if you've ever listened to anything with Ted Nugent, but someone asked him once about the ATF, and you got to hear it. He does one of the best monologues about the ATF. He goes, whoever thought that up, he goes, was the biggest idiot. Like, think about it like this. You have a right that says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So we need an agency to watch over the right that shall not be infringed. That makes a lot of sense. That's like saying we have the free speech in this country, but we need a ministry of truth to watch over free speech.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to go after the cartel, though.
Right.
They're not going to go after the fucking ones that bring it in here.
Well, the cartel, it's funny you bring that up. On my podcast, I interviewed Mike Deddy. He's an author of a book called Operation Wide Receiver, which was the start of the ATF's gun running schemes on the border down in Arizona. And he did his patriotic duty. When you have a gun shop, the ATF interviews you and says, like, you might come across somebody it's pretty obvious what they're doing, and give us a call and we'll help. We'll take it from there, and okay, fair enough. Yeah, we don't want guns ending up in the hands of cartels or whatever, So Mike Deddy is working one of the gun shows in Arizona, and some kid comes up with a bag of cash and says, what is that? And it's an AR-15 lower receiver. And he says, what does it do? And he says, well, you build ARs out of it. And he goes, oh, okay, I want it. And he goes, okay, and puts his name in the, fills out the form and passes the background check and pays, I think it was $25 at the time, or $125 or something like that. Kid comes back an hour later with like $2,500 cash and says, how much for all of them? Do you have more? He goes, yeah, I have a couple more. He goes, all right, I'll buy them. So now alarm bells start going off. He goes, I better keep this one aside. So he sells them, and kid comes back, says, I want 25 or 30 more next week. He says, okay, no problem. So he calls the ATF, says, I got this kid. Here's his name. He bought a bunch, cash, didn't really know about the guns, just wanted to know about it, and wants another 30 of them. I think he's probably a front for the cartel, trying to buy guns, send them down to Mexico. And ATF calls him back, goes, 100%, that's what's going on with this kid. But here's the thing. We want you to sell them to him, and we want to track where they go. We want to bust and bring down the cartel and all this. So Mike Deddy says, okay, great. Yeah, that sounds, I'll help. You want me to let the sale go through? Yep, we're going to watch them. We're going to photograph them. We're going to do this. We're going to track them. Okay. So ultimately, this happens a few times. More and more people start coming to Mike for buying these guns. He keeps proffering this information to the ATF, and they're all over it. They set him up with, wires and cameras in the house, and he's doing business out of his house. So he's got these drug cartels coming to his house. Think about that, how that makes you sleep well at night. And all with the promise that the ATF is going to swoop in at any moment and round these guys up, and they're going to talk, and we're going to get the big fish, eventually. He ended up signing an agreement with them to work with them for 3.5 years. After about 3.5 years, he's like, when is the hammer going to get brought down?
Right.
Because he personally put over 1,000 guns into the wild. They know for a fact that they were in Mexico within a day or two in the hands of cartels. And the Phoenix office of the ATF went from like 3 people to like 27 people. And they expanded this into Operation Operation Fast and Furious. So when it started with Mike Deddy, it was called Wide Receiver. It ultimately ballooned into Operation Fast and Furious, which had many dealers in the state and other states, Texas and other border states, participating in this. So basically, the government was telling gun shop owners to sell to the cartel so that they could bust them. Well, guess what? They never busted them.
They never did.
No way.
No. And then they tried to blame the gun shops for running guns into Mexico so that they could close down these dealers and charge them with, gun running schemes. And when it was a huge embarrassment, I think it cost $30 million, but by the time it was all said and done, that they had spent of taxpayer money to sell guns to the cartels. And then a few of those guns were found when Officer Brian Terry, a Border Patrol agent, was killed doing his job on the border. One of the guns from Fast and Furious was used to kill Border Patrol Officer Brian Terry. When El Chapo was rounded up, all the guns that were surrounding him were all from Operation Fast and Furious. And Eric Holder, the Attorney General that authorized this whole abuse of power, refused to testify. He actually stood in contempt of Congress. He wouldn't go testify. He said it was attorney-client privilege with him and Obama. And that he didn't need to testify. They put Steve Bannon in jail, and they put Roger Stone in jail for contempt of Congress. And Eric Holder's still walking the earth today in contempt of a congressional subpoena to testify about Operation Fast and Furious. Madness. And meanwhile, they want to pin the blame on us for every bad negative outcome with a firearm, when the ATF is the one who is, burning people to the ground, selling guns to the cartels, shooting women holding their infant in the face, and then storming Brian Malinowski's house in the wee hours of the morning while he's sleeping with his wife. It's unbelievable. This is an organization. This is a 3-letter agency, a bureaucracy that needs to go away immediately.
All of them.
Yeah. And if it wasn't for those pictures of David Chipman standing in front of those smoldering ashes in Waco, Texas, he would have been confirmed as the director of the ATF. But instead, we got Chipman 2.0, Stephen Dettelbach, who is every bit as complicit in that operation as David Chipman was, but he didn't have the smoldering pictures to tie him back to it.
It's all contrived. This is what they want. They set it up for madness to ensue, and then they're going to gaslight everyone and say, you're the problem. Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode. If you are enjoying our show and support the It Can't Be a Joke mission, please consider leaving us a review on your streaming platform, following us on X, YouTube, Instagram, and Rumble, and showing your support by purchasing one of the many items we have for sale on our merch shop, which can be found in our link tree on our social media sites.
We're always looking to work with like-minded individuals, so if you're interested in working together or sponsorship opportunities, shoot us a message or email. Thanks again for all of your support.
Now, back to the episode.
You had posted a couple days ago, the gun deaths in Massachusetts is a direct result of our proximity to trauma centers and not because of our strict gun control policy. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So Massachusetts was awarded the lofty grade of A. We were upgraded from A- to A by the Giffords Center. And Giffords is this purist organization, obviously, who tracks these things and awards these grades. So they awarded us an A for H4885 or Chapter 135 that passed, and all the work that the state is doing to reduce gun crime, quote unquote. And I hate that made up propaganda term in the first place, but we'll go along with it. And they said that Massachusetts is one of the safest states in the country as far as gun death is concerned. I would argue that's nonsense. Number one, we are the most violent state in New England. We're far more violent than Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island, Connecticut. Doesn't matter. We're number 26 when it comes to violence of all 50 states. Mm-hmm. So we're at the bottom of the top of the bottom half, really. Mm-hmm. We're 26th worst state in the country as far as violence is concerned. Ironically, the actual safest state in the country is New Hampshire. They are the number one lowest violent crime rate in the country, period. Full stop. They're a constitutional carry state. Giffords gives them a D-. Safest state in the country, D-. Wow. Massachusetts, A. And we're the most violent state in New England. So this is the manipulation of data to arrive at a certain goal through nefarious and preying on the people who don't pay attention to this stuff. And every single one, the speaker, Elizabeth Warren, the governor, all reposted this saying what a great thing it was for Massachusetts. And most of the shootings take place in the urban area, which is minutes from a major trauma center. We have one of the most densely populated healthcare or medical facilities in the country, right in our metro area. The person who actually brought this to my attention was Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a bunch of books. I've read a lot of his books. I like his books. He's a very liberal Canadian guy who did a series on his podcast called Revisionist History. And he did a 6-part series on firearms in America. And he's a great speaker. He's an excellent author, a good writer, but he hates the Second Amendment. And he hates the fact that we have a right to keep and bear arms in America. And he did a pretty good job on this 6-part series. And one particular one, he started to analyze the data in Chicago and Detroit and New York City and stuff, and realized the reason there isn't more gun deaths or people dying, negative outcomes with firearms, deaths in these areas is because of their proximity. And they got really good at saving people's life who are shot, like through the lung, for instance. Like if you live 20 minutes from a trauma center, you're dead if you get shot in the lung. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're going to die, most likely, depending on the damage and wound damage. So these trauma centers got really good because they got a ton of practice from the gangbangers and whatever, violent community that's living there. I mean, the average weekend in Chicago, it's 50 to 60 people get shot.
My God.
Every weekend. And, and the fact that there aren't more dying isn't because there aren't a lot of people getting shot. It's because they're good at keeping them alive. And that's exactly what's happening in Massachusetts. And they're doing this victory lap saying what a great place we are. When really, and then they say it's because of our strict gun control. No, it's not. Because every time you round up these people who end up in these shooting situations or are the fentanyl dealers with the 5 illegal guns, you can quickly see that they didn't buy these guns in Massachusetts. They're not licensed to carry holders. They didn't pass a background check, and they're career criminals. Oh, what a surprise, So it doesn't matter what law you pass, what gun control law you pass, it's not going to solve that problem because they don't obey the law in the first place.
They're going after the people who you want to have self-defense because those are the ones that are going to protect you if you need it. That's why people like you get licensed carry. It's why I get licensed carry. It's why Melissa gets this. It's so we can protect if ever needed. If there's a psychopath going crazy and you have your protection with you, you could take down that person who's about to go do a heinous crime or who's in the act of doing a heinous crime. They're going after the good people. They don't care about the people who are getting it illegally. They're not doing anything to crack down on that. There's no... I'm now starting to hear what we're going after the cartel. Kash Patel, that's one of the big things.
Love that guy.
Yeah, I'm listening to what he wants to do. And I don't know how anyone couldn't get on board with that.
Right.
He wants to go after the corruption and bring the corruption down. Wow, you got my vote, Kash. Thank you. And it just blows my mind. I cannot... They set up these agencies so they can do whatever they want. They're masters of manipulation. They lie and they deceive. And they've got a stranglehold on tens of millions of people in this country. I think every day more and more people are waking up, and it's word of mouth. It's spreading the word. You're not going to get it from the mainstream media, any news source, because as we also talk about a lot is Operation Mockingbird. This is leaked CIA documents, whistleblowers. They have confirmed this information. The media's buying out the CIA's buying out of the mainstream media to write and present the stories that they approve of. The CIA, the FBI, the ATF, the FDA, they all work in tandem together, and it's to keep you down, it's to keep your mind in prison, and so they can control you. It is all just part of their elaborate hoax. It's unbelievable.
And I think that's a good point because they're not stupid. They're not trying to solve a problem in the most inefficient way because they really don't understand what's going on. They really don't get that, taking guns away from good people and responsible people doesn't stop criminals from doing bad things with guns. They understand that. And they understand that the media carries their water, whether it's because they own it or they work in tandem or in a conspiracy to, put out information that they want, which I totally believe happens. I think that was pretty obvious with the whole COVID thing and everything else. So they know that passing these laws or enforcing these regulations aren't going to make us safer. In fact, they don't want it to make us safer. They need the violence to perpetuate their wanting to ban guns. That's what has worked for 40 years and 50 years on when it comes to gun control and all the buzzwords. I mean, in the 70s, it was the Saturday Night Special. Then in the 80s, it was machine guns and non-sporting rifles. Then in the 90s, it was assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And then it morphed into common sense gun control. And then it was universal background checks. And then it was, sensitive locations. And now they don't say gun control anymore. They say gun safety. It's gun safety legislation. Just gun. Massachusetts leads the charge on gun safety because everybody wants us to be safe, right? And government's doing zero to make us safe. No. Gun safety has progressed because of the industry, because of education, and not because of legislation. But they know that, and they just keep using these made-up propaganda terms to scare, to get emotional buy-in, to control the narrative to through the media to the people. But you did raise up a great point. People are waking up, and they're saying, and one of the biggest wake-up calls was 4 years ago when everybody's locked in their house, and that was the start of letting prisoners and inmates out of jail. Like, oh, we can't have them socially distanced, separated 23 hours a day in their cell. We got to let them into the community, right?
Now they care. We were treating you like worse than dogs, but now we care.
Absolute kooks.
Yeah.
Madness.
But it's all by design. Again, it's madness and kooks, but they're smart because they know how to manipulate. It's the whole ends justify the means, the Saul Alinsky, you know, it doesn't matter that they manipulate, lie, violate their oath, cheat, steal, and people end up dying as a result, as long as it furthers their agenda. That's the real goal in all of this. And they're like, hey, you know, ends justify the means. And that's what Maoism was. That's what, you know, the whole communism and the Marxism was. It was, you know, control the masses through the messaging, through the media, through the you know, get everybody equally poor and, you know, relying on government. And that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
And but people are waking up. So during that time when everybody was watching on TV, their cities burning, inmates being let out of jail, and gun shops like ours being closed, but liquor stores and abortion clinics get to stay open, and medical and the marijuana dispensaries all stay open, but the gun shop, which is protected by the Constitution a constitutionally protected activity, has to close. Gyms are closed, and meanwhile cities are burning, and people are going, oh my gosh, I have nothing to protect myself. I had a lady come in. She was actually my middle school lunch lady. I recognized her immediately.
Cool.
She was just a little older. She comes in the shop and looks around, deer in the headlights kind of. She barely got in the door and stopped. I go, how you doing today? And she goes, I don't like guns. I said, oh, okay. You know, well, you don't have to get a gun. I can help you, though, if you want one and tell you how to do. She goes, how do I get a gun?
Yeah.
You know,
that's what we want people thinking right now.
Yeah. She was like, I don't like guns, but how do I get a gun? She's in this conundrum in her mind. She's been ingrained. She's been beat over the head by the media and her friends and relatives and her, you know, the place she works for her whole life, saying bad, 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 bad. And now all of a sudden she sees no other option. How does a little old lady protect herself when a roving band of mobs start burning the city down and start going door to door, right?
Yeah.
Encouraged by the government.
Right.
They were encouraging it, remember?
Bailed out of jail.
We need more rioting. That's what they said. We need more rioting.
I was living in the Twin Cities when the pandemic hit, and of course everyone working in public radio, that we were necessary workers to go broadcast and
their propaganda.
Propaganda.
Yeah.
I'm like, we're necessary workers? These are the necessary.
Please go incite fear amongst all the listeners, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But I believe that, you know, the media has lost the narrative. People are waking up. Podcasts like this, people are listening to more than ever, you know, the stuff happening on social media, and the news has shifted. It's easy to get information now and prove how ridiculous the narrative that's been pushed down our throats for decades looks right now. It's ridiculous. You know, nobody's listening to it and following along unless you really have drunk the Kool-Aid, and that's, you know, there's people out there that are never going to break outside of that echo chamber, but that's fine. You know, the rest of us who are awake and saying, oh my gosh, we have a lot of work to do to get out of the stream that we've been swimming down because it's easy, and get out and say, we need to start building a dam here and try to see our rights restored. You know, that's really what it comes down to.
You grew up around guns, and we were curious, what was your introduction, you know, and what kept your interest? I read that, you know, your parents it wasn't a firearms house.
No, it wasn't. That's the funny thing, is I didn't really grow up around guns. I mean, I always, you know, I was a typical boy, wanted to whittle sticks into sharp spears and go, you know, chuck them at whatever moved in the woods, you know. It's like, but when I was 12, it was the first time I got to shoot, and it was with the Boy Scouts. And man, was I alive. I was like, this is amazing. How have I not had this in my life? And I just loved it. I liked the nuance of it. I liked the smell of the gunpowder. I was just totally blown away. And it's a day I'll never forget. I literally enjoyed it that much.
Yeah.
And my parents were standing about 100 yards behind in the wood line, like watching from afar, like with this grimace
so
on their
nervous.
face. Like, what are we doing? Should we be allowing this right now? But my parents wouldn't let me get a BB gun, you know, and that was probably a good call on their part, like knowing how I am, you know.
Sneak in an airsoft.
My brother had one.
Yeah. Well,
He was probably 12.
I mean, I had other weapons, you know, I went through my ninja phase and I had swords and throwing stars and knives and, you know, nunchucks and the whole 9 yards. But my parents drew the line at guns. No, you're not going to get a gun and blah, blah, blah. And again, that might have been a good call on their part. I don't know. But I always loved firearms. And then when I was 18, I was at the police station on my birthday with my filled out application, my check for $100, and my certificate. You know, I had done the course to get my license to carry. And they're looking at the date on this. They're looking at me like, they're like, we got a live one here, fellas. Like, so they were like, yeah, well, we'll see if it goes through. You know, we were a May issue state at the time. And I was applying for my license to carry at 18. Now you got to be 21 and federally and state to buy a firearm. But anyway, I checked in with them like a week later. Did it come in yet? Did it come in yet? You know, and they're like, no, kid, take a hike. We'll call you. So a couple months go by and I'm like, I go in, I muscle up the courage and I say, hey, state law says you got to respond within 40 days. And you know, it's been 2 months. We're 60 days out, and I haven't heard a word. What's going on? And they're like, we told you, we'll call you when it comes in. Yeah. Beat it. Now, you know, I'm paraphrasing, but beat it, you know? Mm-hmm. And 6 months later, I went in and I said, this is getting ridiculous. You know, I have a right to keep and bear arms. Where's my license to carry? They pull out the drawer and pull out an envelope with my name on it. And they're like, don't screw it up. And they hand it to me. So they've been hoping I just would go away. They didn't want to issue me the license, you know? And that was, you know, then I started hunting and I started buying firearms like they were going out of style. You know, it was pretty funny. I remember a couple times burning like an entire week's pay on a gun. Like, I still have that gun. It was the first handgun I ever bought. It was a Colt 1911. And I remember I had to put a couple $100 down, and then I went in the next week, cashed my paycheck, and went down to the Goose Hummock in Hyannis and doled out the rest of the cash. Had just enough. I don't even think I had enough to buy a box of ammo, you know. But I was like, yeah, I got my first handgun. And then I'd be involved in like gun clubs, and I was a hunter and whatnot. But I remember thinking all along, that whole experience when I applied for my license to carry, something wasn't sitting right with me. I'm like, I thought this was a right. Mm-hmm. It is acting more like a privilege. Like, I got to ask permission. I might not get it. I got to pay a fee. I got to take a class. I have to get fingerprinted, photographed.
It takes so
background
long.
checked. 3-6 months, you know, 3 or 6 months. And I'm going, this isn't right. There's something wrong here. That isn't how rights work. And that was just an intuition I had that, you know, alarm bells going off in the back of my head. Then, you know, in my career, I was a carpenter and a builder and whatnot. And I remember working on some of the wealthiest people's houses in the world, really. And I was thinking, like, man, if I had that guy's money, I would sue the state for my rights, and I would sue this and sue that. And you know, we need this money. We need someone to just step in. And it wasn't until this year when that law passed, the governor signed it less than a week later, and then 71 days after she signed it, she signed that emergency preamble once she realized we were going to have enough votes or enough signatures to get the law suspended, that no one's coming to save us. Like, that guy that I was hoping, the billionaire gun guy, would come in and just drop a bunch of money on the state and make everything right. There's nobody coming to save us. Mm-hmm. If we're going to see our rights restored, it's got to be us that do it.
Yeah.
Right? And I said, I guess I'll be the billionaire guy without the $1 billion and just go out there and do it. And so that's what we did, and what we're doing with the Civil Rights Coalition. And but I realized it just takes people to get together and do it, because government has been dictating to us for far too long what our rights look like, and that isn't how it works. And it's time they be reminded that, you know what, you can't do that. There's constitutional limits.
You are supposed to work for us.
Right. Amen.
Yeah.
We don't work for you.
Yeah.
It's getting closer and closer to just complete totalitarian rule, and they're doing it, you know, under the guise of trying to make you, just like you said, safe and safer. But they're pushing it closer and closer to that. With, I mean, if they take away your right to protect yourself, you have lost all your rights. And going back to, I want to talk about the taxes that they're charging here. And in the state of Massachusetts, it's one of the highest tax states in the entire country. It's not going back to you. It's not going back to, let's look at being outsiders that moved here from Nebraska, where people complained about the roads all the time, and moving to here. The roads in Nebraska seem like we're driving on the road Heaven's Gate, like up to Heaven's Gate. We're looking at it here in Massachusetts. It is unreal how terrible it is. And then you have to just look, where is my tax money going? Where is it? And then they'll say things like, we don't have the funds to do that. We don't have the money to do that. And then you'll see the next day in the news, oh, another $50 billion we're sending over to Ukraine and Israel or whatever. And it keeps happening day after day.
Yeah.
It is complete and utter theft of your money. They are doing that by design. And then look at your 401k. They say you can't spend your own money till you're 60, but hey, we're still going to tax you on it. So they're just stealing your money. Oh, and if you pull it, don't worry, we'll take a little penalty there. We're going to charge you an extra 10% on top of that. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I can't, it's just like, oh my God.
They don't have one hand in your pocket. They have both hands in your pockets. And government has looked at us as an ATM for a long time. And you're 100% right. Massachusetts, one of the highest taxed states in the nation, just 2 years ago passed the millionaire's tax. And they all of a sudden made a whole bunch of people into millionaires that aren't necessarily millionaires. It's, you know, the sound of it sounded great. Like, oh yeah, make those people pay their fair share. And what those people did, the ones that are truly millionaires or wealthy, they're like, you know what, I'm staying 4 months out of the year in Florida anyway. I guess I'll stay 6 months in a day and become a Florida resident. And now I don't pay taxes.
Yeah.
Period. You know, and so the millionaire's tax and the income tax that they were paying are now gone. And the problem is, when Maura Healey took office 2 years ago, Charlie Baker was the governor for, you know, whatever it was, 2 or 3 terms. And I'm not a huge fan of Charlie Baker as far as what he accomplished in the state. But one thing he did do was leave the state in good fiscal shape. There's $7 billion in the rainy day tax rainy day fund. There was so much excess money in the state that it triggered like Article 63 or whatever it is, where they had to give the money back.
Really?
Yeah.
Wasn't it going to schools and?
It was going to all that stuff, but that's how highly taxed we are. So there was like a $3 billion surplus that they had to give back to the people. I got a check, my wife got a check, a bunch of people got a check, and we're like, what's this money? Oh, they've been overtaxing you for so long that there was billions of dollars in a fund. Even after giving back the $3 billion, the state had a $1.7 billion surplus. Maura Healey comes in and burns $2 billion right out of the gate on the whole right to housing, right to shelter, for people who don't have a right to be here.
Yeah.
And
Oh my God.
and now we have a $1 billion deficit. That is a $2.7 billion swing in 2 years, even after passing the millionaire's tax. It's madness. We're like, you're bankrupting, the state with sheltering people who shouldn't be here in the first place.
And just remember that money, it's not going back to you. It's going back to people who are not coming here the right way. Proper background checks. We want people to live here. We want people to migrate here and to live in this amazing country.
Right.
Absolutely. Do it the right way. Right now, what is it, 50 million? 40 to 50 million? I always hear different numbers.
Whatever it is, it's more than you think.
It's unreal. And the amount of people who are rapists, murderers, thieves, and who have done the most unspeakable crimes are here. Why else would we all be wanting to get our license to carry? It's because look at the situation that we're in right now. All of that money just going straight back, not to help you, not to help your family, not to fix your roads, but to just go off to people that are not even from here. All your tax dollars. Oh, man. But going back to where this is, like, this country was founded on, we were all migrants at one point.
Right. I think that the intent of the people who came 400 years ago, one of which is my ancestors, I'm a Winslow, that came on the Mayflower.
Whoa.
And if you look back at the history of the Mayflower and the pilgrims that came here, they came here for 3 reasons. And the third one is never taught in any government-mandated education. You'll never hear this in a school. Number 1, they came here for religious freedom. Everyone kind of knows that, right? They were being oppressed by King of England, so they moved to Leyden, Holland. They were in Holland, and they didn't want to raise their children in that secular culture. They didn't like the environment. They wanted their children to have kind of a new and pristine environment for them to raise them according to their biblical beliefs and without outside influence. So that was the second reason. Number 1, to escape the basically tyranny of King of England, and secondly, to get their kids out of this secular environment and raise them in a new area. The third reason was they felt that the Native Americans in America were the lost tribe of Israel. They thought that they were the 12th tribe of Israel, that is the lost tribe of Israel. And they wanted to evangelize them for the gospel of Jesus. And so that was like a big evangelistic endeavor that they felt they were a lost people of earth, basically indigenous people and whatnot. And when they came, they immediately ended up creating an alliance with Sachem Massasoit, who was the chief of all the chiefs. He was the chief Sachem. And this is something I'm very proud of. After they met Squanto, who knew English from being a slave and being on a fishing vessel, who escaped and made it back to Plymouth Colony and everything. Back to the Wampanoag tribe. But this is fascinating. Edward Winslow, my great uncle, learned that Massasoit became gravely ill. He walked from Plymouth Colony to Middleborough to visit him. And at the time, I don't know if it's still a culture with the Native Americans or not, but they considered a visit to somebody on their deathbed as the greatest honor you could ever bestow a human being. Like if you visited someone on their deathbed, that was like the greatest honor. So here Edward Winslow shows up, and he doesn't just visit Massasoit, he stays and he nurses him back to health. Wow. He brings him back to health. Massasoit says, and this is a quote, "I knew then that the white man loved us." And he gave all of his children Christian names, King Philip and everything else, and they signed a 50-year peace treaty between Plymouth Colony and the Wampanoags. And the Wampanoags were, Massasoit was the chief of chiefs. He was the chief sachem. So the Nauset, the Massachusetts, all the other tribes in the state all kind of were under the operation of Chief Massasoit. The Massachusetts Indians were kind of like out in the northern part of the state, northeastern part of the state, might not have got the memo about the 50-year peace treaty. So they decide to attack Plymouth Colony. And Massasoit hears about this. He says, not on my watch. And so they set up a defense of Plymouth Colony, and all the colonists are there with their, muskets and their bayonets, shelling whatever they have, and they're there on the wall. Nope, the Wampanoags went out and attacked the Massachusetts Indians with such a severe attack to send a message to any other tribe in the state that hands off Plymouth Colony. You're not going to come at them. And not a single Englishman fired a shot that day in their own defense. And it was done to send a message. And that 50-year peace treaty held to the day. And they had a great relationship, a wonderful relationship. They coexisted. They did business. They shared of their, that
was good.
Yeah, it was very good
for a while. And
yeah, I'm not whitewashing the horrible atrocities that happened.
But it was at the beginning, it was good relationship. The original Thanksgiving, they were having a blast. Wasn't there wrestling matches and they were having fun?
Yeah. And then King Philip, Massasoit's son, wasn't a fan, and he's the one who started the whole King Philip's War. But that was after the 50-year peace treaty that his father had signed with the Pilgrims, and so I find it fascinating that some of the founding documents from the Revolutionary War era drew upon the Mayflower Compact that was signed. Some of those early settlements from Plymouth Colony, and they were basically acknowledging human right and agreeing to operate within that basic human rights. So it was hugely influential. Something you said earlier too, and I didn't want to forget about it, but Caesar Beccaria was a 17th century criminologist, and he wrote in a book, I think it's called, the name of the book's slipping my mind right now, but he wrote in his book that arms bans only benefit the evil or the criminal because it disarms the people who are most likely needing to use them to defend themselves against the bad guy. Right. Yes. So you're just making their job easier. I'm paraphrasing, but you're making their job very easy, so don't ban arms, period. That's off limits. And contrary to what happens today, every time a negative outcome with a firearm happens or someone gets attacked or shot, and we say, we got to take away the guns. In the founding era, in 1700s, 1800s, when there was a real threat to a community. In fact, some of the early blue laws in Massachusetts was you could be fined a very severe fine if you got caught walking to church without your gun. If you got caught walking to church without your firearm, you could be fined.
Wow.
And nowadays they're like, we need to make guns a sanctuary, place of, what do they call it? A sensitive location. So you can't bring them, a government mandated gun-free zone. That's what they want to do every couple of years. They bring this stuff up. But back then they recognized, make sure everybody's armed and able to defend, and don't get caught without your gun or you're going to be fined. So that was that whole mentality back then, that defending life, defending, the basic human right.
Yeah.
And can you talk about the law in Massachusetts where I've heard this in our training? Someone breaks into your home. I've heard from different sources you have the right to defend yourself if someone breaks into your home, but they have to cross the threshold or something. What is the law there?
Yes, it's very confusing, and it could be, I'm sure that, whenever you go to a class like this, they're going to tell you the worst case scenario, right? In Massachusetts, if you shoot somebody in defense of yourself or others, I don't care if it's inside the home or outside the home, you're probably getting charged with something, whether it be assault and battery with a deadly weapon or attempted murder or whatever, just because that's the mentality in the judicial system in Massachusetts. The DAs and Attorney General and everything else is guns bad. So any outcome with a firearm that results in somebody getting shot it's a bad thing. So they're gonna charge you. But under the letter of the law, we have what's known as the castle doctrine in the house. So if you're in your curtilage or your home, inside your home, you have a reasonable expectation that you're safe. This goes back to the 18th century too, where think about back then with candlelight and gaslight, and it would be tough to get light, and you hear someone coming in, the extra level of intensity of a home invasion at night would carry, the fear that it would strike in your heart, that it carried a much greater penalty, and it still does today. But outside the home, you have this thing called duty to retreat. So if you technically can't engage with someone with a deadly force unless you've exhausted your escape route. So like, yeah, if you're down an alley with a wall behind you and walls on both sides, I guess you don't need to try to get away. You could go right to defending yourself with a firearm. In both situations, there's something called reasonable fear of loss of life or great bodily injury. This is the kind of use of force continuum that if that level of fear has been met, then you can use that level of force. It's called the use of force continuum. And if you shoot someone in the back as they're fleeing, you're going to have a hard time proving that you were in fear for your life and, you had to act when the guy's 100 yards, he's at the end of your driveway with a gunshot wound in the back and he's laying face down on the pavement. Now, I don't know what happened that resulted in that. Maybe you were fearful of your life and I don't know, the guy had a, RPG or something. I don't know, whatever the situation was. But the point I'm trying to make is what it really boils down to is could versus should.
Yeah.
And that's a decision that each one of us have to make internally. We have to resolve in our heart, like, if I'm in a situation where I can get away or I don't have to take a life, that's a better option for me than whether I'm legally justified in shooting them or not, right? Mm-hmm. If there's a way out of it and I don't have to shoot the guy, like a guy's visibly drunk in the wrong house and he wants to steal my TV, yeah, probably not shooting that guy, right? But if the guy comes in, with a team of ninjas and he's threatening my life and my family, yeah, that's a different story, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, we teach set your house up in a way that is convenient to retreat into a place that you can defend, get 911 on the phone, get the professionals to come and defend that position. If they keep kicking the door in and bust through and they're ready to, kill you, all bets are off. I'm going to defend my life and my wife and my family. Yeah. So, and also don't be a soft target, like, have some lights, make sure you do some environmental stuff where you keep the trees pruned down and the bushes pruned down and lock the doors, maybe get an alarm system, maybe get some cameras around the house, that type of thing. So it's self-defense or safety is a mindset beyond just having a gun, and so that's something that we really want to teach is this environmental holistic approach to being safe. Like if I got cameras, I got Ring doorbell, I got good lighting, and I don't have shrubs that would make it so people can jump out and stab me in the face when I'm walking out my door. And, I might flick the light on and look out in the backyard before unlocking the slider to let the dog out. I'm consciously minded. I'm not saying you got to live like you're on, in the red zone your whole life. I'm saying, but just start to make a little bit of incremental changes, have your head on a swivel a little bit and pay attention to what's going on in the world around you. You're less likely to need any of those life-saving skills like self-defense. Yeah. Makes sense?
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, I like the Shark Tank analogy. So if you're standing over a shark tank full of great whites that are at feeding time and you're pointing out something to your kid and your Rolex watch falls off and sinks to the bottom, you're going to be like, darn it, I got to go find someone to go fish my watch out of the shark tank, right? But if you're standing there with your kid and your kid falls into the tank, you're going in, right? Yeah. You don't care that there's great whites in there. Your kid is more important than the sharks. Mm-hmm. So you're diving in. You're not diving in after a watch. Same thing with somebody who, in any type of situation, there's a confrontational situation. If someone wants my watch, yeah, there's your watch. Take it, leave, bye. And I feel like I can get away. That's a much better outcome for me. But if serious bodily injury or I'm in fear for my life or somebody else's life, then all bets are off. You know, I'm going to take whatever necessary action I need. And I'm not thinking about, oh, I might lose in court because I didn't try to run down the street and over the bushes and hide under hide under the car while I waited for the bad guy to leave. Like, I'm not thinking about that. And none of us would in that situation. That whole Shark Tank analogy is, oh my God, I got to act now.
Yeah.
And if I don't, someone could die. That's really the where I've come in my mind, in my morality, in my, decision-making process is that line. And I don't think it's going to be a cognitive, like, chart that I got to connect some dots to if I find myself in that situation. You're going to react. You're going to act accordingly based on what's going through your mind at the time. And so, if the only thing I would say on the legal side is shut up, just don't say anything. When the police arrive, everyone wants to make it right. Oh my God, he attacked me. Be a good witness. The guy had that gun or that knife. He was wearing a blue hat and white hoodie and he ran that way. That's good information. But that's the extent of it. Now my Fifth Amendment has kicked in and I'm going to talk to my attorney and we'll come up with a statement at some point. But as of right now, I'm shutting up.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to do. Because they're not there to be your friend or to, help you.
Right. And I see, like, our homes I've been saying this past year, that now that I own this place, well, the bank owns it until I fully pay it off, of course. But it's like, this is my castle, and I want to build it that way and have it be safe that way, where I have, like, security camera, and extra locks and that kind of stuff, and like a panic button with the Simply Safe, you press that and then that'll immediately alert. And I think that's an extra added security, just that security blanket. It's like, we have that, we have our Second Amendment right. I brought this out here because when we're done, I'll take it apart and show you, but this is like a sweet hiking staff that every single compartment has different, like, one of them's like a harpoon for fishing. One of them's just like a nice knife. But like, just having these, cool. What is the other one? One's a fire starter. Oh, yeah. Like, it's a survival staff, and you should hold it. It's got a great weight to it. It's badass.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is my Gandalf staff.
It's pretty cool.
One of the last things I want to talk about is what drew me to Massachusetts was its history. I was a history teacher. I went to school to educate on what's happened in our past and to try to find solutions and to talk about it. My classrooms were discussion based. I like having conversations and have people talk because that's how we learn, especially with history. It's social studies, social sciences. Massachusetts is so rich in history, and that's why I wanted to come here. I came here on a school trip when I was 17 and 18, fell in love with the history in Boston. It is unbelievable. The architecture here, the history, everything. And from Paul Revere's Midnight Ride to the Battle of Lexington and Concord to the Battle of Bunker Hill, you name it, it breathes American Revolution and freedom. And it's like, this is it. Plymouth Rock. I live in Plymouth Rock. Like,
Have you seen the Forefathers Monument yet?
Which one?
The Forefathers Monument.
Is it in Plymouth?
It's right in Plymouth. It's right up the street from the Plymouth Rock.
I probably have. It's a
giant monument, and it's multi-sided. I wouldn't.
Yes,
you have seen it.
Is it? I think we walked by it when we were going to the parade. Is there a park surrounding it? And it's a big thing in the middle?
Yeah, it's like one big park. There's like a lot of land around it, but I grew up in Massachusetts. We went to Plymouth Plantation and Plymouth Rock every year on a field trip. I didn't know about the Forefathers Monument until like 5 years ago. Talk about being pissed off and not like under. Right. And the reason it gives the history as you go around it. It's a fascinating memorial. And one of the things, sorry to interrupt you and kind of bring us back to the earlier discussion. That's it.
I haven't.
And it is.
Oh, no, I haven't seen it.
Every little side of it tells a story, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I celebrated the 400th anniversary of Plymouth Plantation and the Mayflower voyage at the Forefathers Monument with my uncle, who is a Winslow, as well as a whole bunch of Winslows. But the coolest part was we had 3 tribes of Native Americans there as well, celebrating the union between the Plymouth settlers and the Wampanoags. Well, even though the Wampanoags weren't there, we had the Blackfoot, the Mohawk, and the Navajo. And one of the chiefs from the Black Hawk tribe came. He's a 5th generation pastor, Christian pastor, 5th generation. So he's like a direct descendant from 18th century or 19th century interaction and conversion through Christianity. And he gave an amazing speech at that event. But it was just wonderful to see thousands of people there from all over the country who are all descendants from the Mayflower or tribes, Indian tribes. And we had just a wonderful day. It was fascinating. So I was so mad when I finally found that, because I'm like, I went and looked at a rock, and I went to Plymouth Plantation, which were great stuff. I love it. But right up the street is that tells the whole story.
I can't believe they never told you guys.
I know.
Like, what?
I was beyond myself about it. And Kirk Cameron was there. He gave a speech too that day about.
Is he from here?
No. In fact, his movie is the one that alerted me to it. Really? I didn't know about it till he did a movie about that monument.
Wow. Oh, really?
And I was like, what the heck? How did I not know this? And I drove to it, and I'm like in awe, like looking at this thing going, this is amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, but it was all the pillars of society that Plymouth Colony was founded on. But anyways, sorry.
We're gonna go there this weekend.
Yeah, you got to check it out. Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's pretty cool.
There's just exactly that.
The history.
Every town here is so old. It all has so much history. It's like you'll find something so cool everywhere you go. That's what I love about it. But we're talking about that and how it just breathes revolution, freedom. How did it get to the point that it's like this? That's what I would like to end with.
Man. You're right. It's the birthplace of freedom, and unfortunately has come full circle. The tyranny that has arisen as a result of the people not paying attention to what's going on in government for so long. Let's draw the comparisons. Thomas Gage sent his redcoats to march on Concord and Lexington to do what? Confiscate the arms, the shot, the balls, the powder from the colonists. And what do we have now? We got another governor, Maura Healey, hasn't marched yet, but has passed legislation that, or signed into law, taking the rights of the people from guns that are in common and ordinary use for lawful purposes in this country, which is the definition of protected arms, taking protected arms from the people, and gets the endorsement of the red shirts, the Moms Demand Action, the Giffords, the Bloombergs, the Everytown, the all the big money, the Brady, the Soros, all that stuff, and has created the 2 tiers of government, or the 2 tiers of society, where you have the ruling class and then the serfs and the peasantry, which is exactly what we rejected from Great Britain with King George III. We said, no, that is not going to work for us. We reject your model. We reject your tyranny. And we threw off and cut those bands and created the greatest country the world has ever seen. And now we're coming full circle to putting back the very tyranny that we rejected. How did it happen? That's a great question. I think that the people like you and I, or the people who are good people, family people, or just people who are hardworking folks, we just want to be left alone. We don't want, anyone breathing down our neck. We're busy. We got to, if you have a family, you bring in your kids to all the events they're going to. You may or may not go to church. You go to, probably you are a member of some civic association or club or, sportsman's association or clam diggers union or whatever you do, right, on Saturday afternoon. Unfortunately, today, I would say we've entered the bread and circus of, modern era. We're being entertained. There's grown men that sit and watch a TV all day, Saturday and Sunday, and paint their bodies the color of their favorite sports team, and refine their chip dip recipe so that they can have their friends over on Saturday and Sunday. And again, there's a place for that.
Yes.
Right? A time and a place for that.
Yeah.
But when that has become our sole focus, we sit here and wonder how we lost our rights. Well, because we're not paying attention, because we just want to be left alone. Sportsmen especially, we're the type of guys that go sit in a tree for 8 hours waiting for Bambi to walk by, right? Yeah. There's no one around and we like it. And we're like, this is great. I'm out in the middle of the woods by myself, nobody to bother me. And like, I'm freezing my butt off and I'm, peeing behind a tree, but guess what? I'm happy,
Yes.
We're the people that just want to be left alone. And meanwhile, government is encroaching every day, usurping every day our rights, and we're not doing anything. We're not paying attention. We're not noticing it until it's too late. It's that Stockholm syndrome. I just keep coming back to it. We're starting to be sympathetic to our captors, and we're saying, oh, what can we do about this? Or do I have to pull a permit for, building that shed in the backyard that's 120 square feet? Or, my dog needs a license and it's got to have its rabies vaccine and it's got to have its thing. And, and I can't run my dog on the beach without a leash, or else I'm going to get a $150 fine. And every aspect of our life is controlled to a point where, I think there's a book out right now, 3 felonies a day. The average American commits 3 felonies a day and doesn't even know it.
Oh my gosh.
Because there's so many laws on the books.
Yes.
And you're just going through life, and meanwhile you just broke like 30 laws, and it's like, give me a break.
Wow.
It's
for
insane.
real. Give me a break.
Yeah.
That's so true.
And that is the exact thing that our founders pushed off, was small government, low intrusion into the lives of people, and government's responsibility should be solely focused on keeping our borders secure, our country safe, making sure no foreign adversary is coming to rob and plunder us, making sure our fleets out at sea doing commerce in the international stage aren't being ransacked by pirates, and that they're creating an environment where American exceptionalism can take root, grow, foster. Because those same people that want to be left alone are the farmers, they're the family people, they're the job providers, they're the blue-collar workers that are going to work 40 hours a week to provide for their family. They're putting their head down, going to work every day. They're driving a truck, or they're turning a wrench, or cutting a board, or
They're
doing
not
something.
waiting to be spoon-fed.
Right. They are what's left of American rugged individualism, and they don't need anybody. They just want to be left alone to do their thing. And we need a great awakening right now. The time is now, or else we're going to have nothing to show for what our founders bled, died, and pledged their fortunes for. Because nowadays we have people that stand up on some state house or Capitol Hill and make a speech, and they're applauded as being brave. No. You guys didn't do a dang thing except raise enough money to put your face on someone's TV enough to get you elected.
To be in a club. But
you aren't pledging your fortunes, your family, and your future for that thing that you're trying to infringe on everybody else. It's a different day and age. And until we rein in the usurpation of our rights, as Samuel Adams and all our founders would have said, is the republic has been lost. And we have a lot of work to do, and it's going to take paying attention and spreading the word and getting active, and that's what you guys are doing, and that's what I'm doing. So let's get it done. Tonight's Midnight Riders are the Civil Rights Coalition, the Gun Owners Action League, and the nearly 100,000, well, probably over 100,000 people in Massachusetts that signed these petitions that we have here today, who are drawing a line in the sand to tell our elected officials, you will not finish the job of King George III. You know the saying, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Maura Healey and her cohorts in the legislature have conspired to defraud you of your God-given rights that no elected official nor man has the authority to take away. We ask our governor and legislature, by what authority do you act upon our unalienable rights? You lack the constitutional authority to take away guns that are in common and ordinary use for lawful purposes and declare peaceful citizens felons just by moving the goalposts and costing taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars in the process. This is what abuse of power looks like.